Hi there, and welcome to another interview. Today I've got the fabulous Carnivore Cam with me, and I'm going to ask him the same question I ask absolutely every guest. Hey Cam, why did you become carnivore?
Well, Stephen, I appreciate it for having me on your podcast, for obviously inviting me on the podcast. Followed you for a while, so I've seen some of your videos. Happy to be on. So my story, I've always been interested in health and nutrition since, probably a young age, really. Probably going into my late teens. I've always tried different things. I've always been obsessed with optimizing my health the best way I can. And, from I started training when I was early. When I was 16, I played sports, and I've just always been looking for ways to find out what the best foods are, and sort of like just doing different research. I've always been fascinated by research and how the body works. So, over years, I've tried many different things. I've tried different diets. Even when I was a late teenager, going into my early 20s, I was trying that kind of the gym bro diet, the bodybuilding diet, the chicken broccoli rice thing, and the tuna and rice, and just getting it in, the protein shakes and all that sort of stuff, which you probably know of as well. That was the way it's supposed to be: 6 meals a day, and it was really low fat as well, slightly high protein, low fat, get your good carbs in. And then it was funny because probably when I was in my mid-20s, I started off doing a lot of dirty foods. I was eating a lot of crap. And when I first started training, I was just eating whatever I want. Early 20s, I was just wanted to be as big as I possibly could, and just started eating meal deals and takeaways, whatever. Then I started to think, right, well, I probably need to start getting a bit more healthy now. So I then digressed into sort of more of a bodybuilding approach. And then it was probably around my mid-20s, maybe mid-20s, I started to look more into it. And this was just when probably the plant-based push was just coming in around this time. It's probably around 2015, around 2016, I'd probably say. I don't know if you remember, but it was kind of like coming in, that sort of the Game Changers was coming out, and 2017 maybe. And I must admit, I watched, I watched a couple of the documentaries. I watched one, that Cowspiracy. I watched the Game Changers probably a couple of years later, and I just thought, you know what, I'll try this. I thought I'd stop eating meat. I didn't go full vegetarian. I was eating a lot of fish, and I was still eating eggs and dairy, but I just stopped eating meat. I didn't eat meat for a few years. Probably a good 4 years I didn't eat meat for, which is crazy to think now, going back. Considering how much I eat now. I didn't eat meat for quite a while, and so I did that for a few years, and then I actually shifted to a predominantly all plant-based approach for an entire year. I did that. So I did for an entire year a plant-based diet where I didn't eat any animal products at all. And that for me, I believe, was the start of me transitioning to carnivore, because I believe that I did that and I ended up feeling pretty bad. Towards the end, I've always been a pretty fit and athletic guy. I've always been able to eat, I've always been able to eat different foods and feel okay, feel good, feel okay. But over amount of time, that's the only thing where I felt I was just feeling bad. I was having skin problems. I was having energy problems. My gut and my stomach was just all over the place. And it's funny because I've said this before in a previous podcast. I said I used to eat. So I used to have like this huge bowl of like porridge with dried fruit and nuts and all sorts of stuff, and this like plant-based protein powder. And I used to eat it, and I used to get like acid reflux and GERD. And I started to think, is that normal? I was like, that can't be normal to eat a meal and then sort of, semi-regurgitate it up. I thought that can't be right. But I just sort of played off and thought, no, well, of course it's healthy, isn't it? It's plant food. Of course it's healthy. Like meat should be limited to, like maybe once a week you have a steak or something, that's the way it should be, because we all know red meat is really, can't have too much of it. But I just started to think, this can't be right. I thought that and then that kind of, not getting too political, but that whole agenda was just not fitting in the way I was thinking. I didn't want to be part of that sort of. And then I started to just doing different research. I started to look at different things and listen to different people. I started to listen to guys like Sean Baker and Joe Rogan had talked about the carnivore diet. And Dr. Anthony Chaffee was actually he was a guy that I listened to who was doing it, and I watched a few videos from him, and I thought, this guy's, I can relate to the guy. He's played sports and he's into the gym, and I thought, he looks, like he's thriving and doing well. So I thought, after going back to eating meat, because by the way, when I went back to eating meat, I just went straight back. I didn't think about it. My body was craving it. I just knew I had to go back and just eat. Like, honestly, I remember it was like a roast dinner that I had. My first meal back with meat was just obviously, English, like, a roast dinner, and it was amazing. Getting, tasting the beef again. It's like my body was just craving it. So after, a good year and a bit of going back to just eating, it was a mainly meat-based diet and still fairly low carb. I was only probably doing about one meal a day, and I was doing some potatoes and some veg. But I mean, I was doing mainly meat and eggs, pretty much was my approach. And it was around the 100 gram of carb mark. So it wasn't very high carb, even then. And then I decided in January of 2023, I said, I'm going to give carnivore a go, full carnivore. I'm going to try it. So I tried it, and I just started to feel great, and it made sense to me. A lot of the ancestral things people were saying, and it made sense. Like, we're designed to eat meat. I feel my digestion's the best when I eat meat. I feel really good when I eat mostly meat. My brain fog, I didn't have brain fog. My mental clarity is really good. My mood was good, and everything just made sense. So. And then I just started doing it more and more. And then I decided, obviously, I was always a fitness coach and on the online space, but obviously not, and then I just started talking about how I was feeling, how I was doing. And I believed in it so much that I started to post more about it and, and going down different avenues and saying, like, this is what I really believe, red meat and eggs are the main foods. And then I went down the sort of the route of how they've been vilified and demonized, and how, like, obviously, Atkins was demonized so much, because that was the thing. And I remember when people were saying about the Atkins diet, people said, oh, well, that was so dangerous, and, all the sort of stuff. And it's just, it's cringing, it's creasing to think like people were saying this. And then I realized that, having done a lot of research, that how many people were paid off to lie and falsify, studies and data and stuff, and how it's so corrupt. And, and then you look at the food supply now, and how what's legal to sell, and all this sugar and refined carbs. And it's just, for me, it's just poison. It's total and utter poison. And no matter what you believe, I always believe natural whole foods will win always over anything artificial. And that's always been my main message, is to eat real food. And I believe that animal foods are the number one priority people should be focusing on for their overall health. And that's why I've really banned the carnivore drum for a long time, because I believe that it's helped, and I've seen it help so many people, and it's, helped with chronic disease and autoimmune conditions, and, people that were probably told by other doctors that they would never be able to cure their condition. And I've heard anecdotal evidence from people who've sent me stuff, and their doctor said, no, sorry, it's just genetic, or it's just the way it is, I'm afraid. Like, just take this medication and it'll be fine. Or you just manage it over a period of time. And I've just always thought, that can't be right. Like, you can't just be on a medication. I know people are different, but, like, in a way, we're all the same. So there's no way that, like, we're not supposed to take medications. We just aren't. We're not supposed to take all this stuff. And it's like, people just accept that it's like, oh yeah, it's so normal, because it is so normal now just to have this stuff. It's like, yeah, just have it, and a doctor will prescribe it. Yeah, and because it's a doctor, you can't go wrong with the doctors. They know what they're talking about, right? So, but having seen people's lives change from just simply changing the way they eat and cutting out the bad stuff, it's amazing. And I thought, I have to start talking about this. I have to start, and that's, I'm voicing my opinion, and I have a strong message, but it's worth it for me, because it's something I truly believe in. So that's kind of led me up to this point, obviously, on social media and talking about what I do and stuff, and so that's kind of led me up to this point now. Yeah.
Brilliant. Yeah, that's great. There's a lot there, actually. Yeah. So when did you start your Instagram channel then?
So, like, solely carnivore, probably, I mean, really talking about carnivore, probably from, I'm trying to think, it was more towards the summer of 2023, I think it was. It was around, maybe just before then, it was like around that time. Yeah, it was before. It was probably like maybe March time, 2023. I started really going in on like, posting about carnivore stuff only. And so I started from there, and obviously Instagram, TikTok, going to have a YouTube channel, but I just post all my videos to YouTube as well. But I mean, yeah, and then it just started to gain in popularity. People started to follow what I did, and I was doing different recipes and stuff, and I was doing like going out and stuff. I think I was doing things that people weren't actually doing at the time. I was doing a lot of eating outs and stuff, and how to navigate, if you're on the road, if you going on trips and stuff, or even how to navigate fast food restaurants and things like that. And people were sort of getting, they were enjoying it and stuff. And I was showing my experience and with the diet. So I think that then it just started to grow, and it just keeps growing still. And I think that a lot of people are waking up to the big food industries, and people aren't believing I think it ties in with a lot with government too. I think a lot of people aren't believing what they're being just told anymore. I think just telling someone to do something and then not explaining why, people are just going, well, why? People are thinking, you can't just tell me that. Because I was always that kid in school that was like, why? Why do I have to do that? Like, and so for someone just to say to me, because you have to, I was like, well, no, I'm not going to do it just because you tell me. I have to have a reason. So I think people have found it, and they're kind of not afraid anymore to just to try and just eat more meat and think, oh yeah, well actually this makes me feel pretty good, so I'm going to just keep doing that. So yeah, that was one of the things why it just started to increase and blow up, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right there. And a lot of the message, a lot of the propaganda, all of a sudden is so ridiculous. They've really pushed their luck, because you can't say that Fruit Loops or sort of crunching up cornflakes is better than steak. That's just absolutely ridiculous. And I think people see through it. I remember when I started Carnivore, so I'm sort of into my 5.5 years of Carnivore, and I was keto before that, low carb at age 50. So here I am at 60. And I can remember 5 years ago thinking, Sean Baker, he talks about politics a lot. Let's just talk about meat. But they are intertwined, because there's so much money behind all the propaganda and all this push to stop you eating meat, because there is so much money in the boxes of cereals and the foods that are made from carbohydrates that have a long shelf life and are very hyper palatable and incredibly profitable. And people are beginning to say, well, this can't be good. And they're also seeing with their own eyes people in the street. We're both in Britain, but it doesn't mean it's just in Britain. You can go out into the high street. You're not surrounded by people that are thriving and fit and healthy and looking great and tanned. Everyone pretty much looks overweight. There's so many mobility scooters, and I'm not knocking any of these people. They have absolutely been let down by people like the BBC News, who don't report the truth, the NHS, who don't report the truth about what we should be eating. So anyone that's new to it is like, oh, stop talking about the politics, just tell me about the food. But in the end, the longer you do this, the more you realise, well, it is a little bit political and they don't want people to know. But you're right. They are questioning it. Everybody is questioning it. This is why I like doing the success stories. And I think it was fabulous that you mentioned the things, like the common sense things, like having acid reflux after that cereal, having that breakfast. That's
porridge.
Yeah, porridge.
Yeah,
porridge was my thing, and it definitely is one of those weird things, and you lose. I used to think that farting was a sort of normal thing, but the gas goes, and it's such a sea change when you start to eat this way. It's really great. So you mentioned that you did all the stuff, the gym bro stuff and tuna and rice and 6 meals a day. Do you feel that you were misled a lot, even though you were someone that thinks they're aware and research?
Yeah, I mean, I will admit that probably, yes, that there has been time. I mean, well, the fact that I went plant-based, I'm fully aware, and I'm not scared to admit when sometimes you are led down the garden path a little bit. And but I think ultimately, I believe that if you are willing to, you have to be willing to try things. So I mean, I've never been scared to try things. So and I've been curious about like nutrition and stuff like that. So, but I believe in the bigger picture, it's actually served me well. So every decision I've made regarding nutrition has led me to this point. So If I was just to say, oh, well, I'm not going to try anything, I'm not going to bother, then I don't think I've got much to go off. I mean, like the fact that I've done a lot of different things and and I kind of know what works for my body. And I think that it's funny because it's kind of like you awake, you have an awakening in a way. It's like, I think it's like when you see what's going on in the mainstream and the governments and the politics, you can't unsee it. And I find that it's kind of unfortunately, and like you say, like you don't really want to bring politics into it, but it does get intertwined because it is kind of a battle in a way. It's like, because there's a lot of people out there who firmly believe that, and they say, you're just a conspiracy theorist and there's nothing going on, and why would these people hurt us? And I'm only listening to the experts, and the experts who are doctors can just say, well, we've got this study and this study and this study and that proves this. And it's kind of hard because there isn't many studies on solely carnivore, and I get that, but the amount of, I've never seen. I've said this to a few people. I say, and I'm not bashing the people who do plant-based community, by the way, because I did it as well. I tried it, didn't work for me. Whether it works for some people, whatever, that's their choice. But I mean, I've never seen a carnivore, mainly carnivore person who's gone vegan and felt awesome. But I have seen many, and I'm talking a lot of people who have switched from a plant-based diet to a carnivore diet and felt amazing. So I think that, and the fact that I've said this a few times with people who are more predominantly plant-based, I just believe that if you have to supplement your diet with something that is found in red meat, something that is like B12, for example, that alone should kind of tell you that it's not actually sustainable. I mean, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to understand that if you have to supplement with something, surely that should tell you that it's not right. And it's like, so when you can get this abundance of nutrients in one food or one or two foods, red meat and eggs, pretty much all the essential nutrients you need to feel amazing, then why would you need to do much else? Like if you base your diet around those two foods, whether you want to eat a few different foods here and there is up to you. But if you base your diet around these two amazing, like the proper superfoods, and it's not kale and it's not pomegranate or any of that stuff that's a superfood, red meat and eggs, in my opinion, are the two biggest and best superfoods out there that provide you with so much nutrition and can help you in so many ways. And you've seen it, I've seen it in so many cases of people who have just literally incorporated those two things in and cut out a lot of the carbs and a lot of the processed stuff, and they've started to feel much better. So I've just seen from anecdotal evidence from a lot of people. And yes, I think that the powers that be have tried their best to manipulate people. Like you say, I think for profit and for gain, because there's, at the end of the day, if people are healthy and fit, there's not going to be much profit. If people are sick and unhealthy, there's going to be a lot of profit. They're going to be able to profit a lot off those people, and not just physically, but what it does to your brain is one of the biggest things that I've noticed too. We have a crisis now of mental health for people who are struggling mentally. And yeah, of course, social media plays a part, and being more sedentary and watching TV and not going outdoors, they're getting enough sun. That's of course. But I believe the biggest thing is food. 100% the biggest thing is what you put. The food you eat is causing the problems in your body. And it's not so much just so cut and dry as genetics. It's what you eat. You are what you eat. So how you feel and how you think and feel is because of the food you're eating. So yeah, I mean, I think that ultimately, keeping it simple and focusing on animal foods is, for me, it was always the priority. And that's what I've seen so many from people who benefited massively from it.
Yeah, I agree. And the thing is, you're right. When you said we've both seen it lots of times. I mean, I've got over 1,000 people now that I've coached in 10 years, and the difference is incredible for all of them. Over 200 video success stories. And people say, yeah, it's just anecdotes, but that's data. When you get into those sort of numbers, and clinical experience, what a person looks like and how they feel is much more important than this buzzword of evidence-based, because that's referring to trials, and trials are fraught with conflicts of interest and adjustments and interpretation. And nothing beats someone saying exactly what you said. I did a year of plant-based and I felt pretty bad. I did a year of carnivore and I felt awesome. Right? Mm-hmm. You don't need a study. That's what happened. They are the things that happened, and it's so simple. And it's great that you're sending the message out and you do it in a nice, plain and simple way. It's not fancy pants, there's not loads of graphics and stuff. This is what I'm going to eat, or this is, where I'm going, and I'm going to try this, and this is what you should do if you're out and about in the town. I think it's just so simple. This way of eating is so simple. I think the other thing about supplements, and I had a vegan surprised that I mentioned that I take one supplement and saying, "Oh, well, you're carnivore, I thought you didn't need them." And I said, "Well, the difference is I choose to do it, whereas you have to. I am biohacking. You have to take vitamin B12. That's a fact. Otherwise, you're going to have problems 5 years down the line with your red blood cell production. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
It's fact of physiology. Like you say, we are all the same, even though we're all different. My joke I always say is surgeons don't open you up and go, right, how does this one work? We all work pretty much the same. So I think that's great. Now, you're not adverse to a little bit of controversy. So on your Instagram at the moment, you're doing something that has sparked a little bit of controversy. So what are you doing and why are you doing it?
It has caused a bit of controversy, I'm not gonna lie. So recently, I started introducing some different foods back in. I introduced some fruit, a bit of honey, and that was pretty much it. I mean, I've always I've drank raw milk and I've had raw dairy before, so I've always been touting that anyway. But I've introduced some fruit and honey back in, and it was mainly out of experimentation and curiosity. I've been doing carnivore for probably 18 months, and I wanted to try a couple of different things. And it's funny that, I mean, it was only small amounts of fruit, a little bit in the morning before training, and a little bit of honey, and it seems to have got everyone really talking and really going and saying, "Oh well, look at this, and look what he's adding back in." Well, it's like, well, calm it a little bit. This is just, as I'm saying, it's just an experiment just to see what's going on. I do absolutely love carnivore, 100% fully carnivore, felt great on it. But I mean, I think I've always been that person that likes to try things out. I think that I'm a person that likes to do that, just to see how my body responds more than anything, just to see what's going on. Because I like to think I'm so in tune with my own body now. I like to try things and see what happens, just to see, if anything happens, anything negative, anything positive. I want to see what goes on. So yeah, I've been doing that for a little bit. More so just more keeping it around the times I train, and seeing what the benefits are, if there is any benefits, because a lot of people talk about that, about the carbs before training or around training and whatever. So I've been trying that out and seeing what's going on. So, but yeah, it sort of coincided with obviously getting my blood work done, which is also why probably a lot of people are putting two together, because a lot of people are saying that I'm introducing some things back in because of a certain blood work or a certain blood work marker that we're probably going to talk about. But that was not the case. It was more just like, I just wanted to see what was going on after a certain amount of time, X amount of time, a year and a half, pretty much to the day of strict carnivore, more strict. I wanted to see what was, just test a few things out. That's what I wanted to do.
Yeah. And the thing is, I mean, I suppose the biggest proponent of fruit and honey is Paul Saladino. And when he started to do it, he proved one of my comments completely correct, because as a specialist practitioner in obesity and diabetes, my big worry is for some people that it will trigger sugar cravings and it's not great for diabetics. You're not unaware of that, are you? I mean, you know that, you're an intelligent person. And I think the fact you're just experimenting is great, because why not? Why not? Just do a bit of biohacking. You might add it back in and feel fabulous. You might add it back in and end up on the Paul Saladino route, where you need more and more carbs, and it might come back to hit you in 5 years' time. But the thing is, if you don't experiment, you don't know. If you're missing those foods, or it does improve your training, then you wouldn't have known that if you didn't experiment. So I think we all need to keep our eyes and ears open. I'm not anti anything. People want to try something. As I said to you before we started recording, someone adds in avocados and they feel even better, then, more power to your elbow. But I think you alluded your blood work and said we might talk about it. So what's the thing in your bloods that you want to talk about?
Well, it was. So I got a couple of, a blood lipid panel taken. So I I got my cholesterol checked, HDL, LDL, and all sort of stuff. And of course, like, it was high. And of course, for a lot of people freaked out about that, probably because it's saying very high cholesterol. I wasn't obviously concerned about that because I think cholesterol is vital for optimal health. And I don't think it's just as cut and dry as having high cholesterol is bad. My triglycerides were ridiculously low. They were low. So for me, that's a good thing. That shows, considering that all I eat is pretty much protein and fat and tons of fat, you would think that all the fat's going to be clogging my arteries when it wasn't. So like, that's the thing. It's so I would show that. But then obviously my HbA1c was the thing that caused quite a bit of a controversy because, and there's been a few people talking about it and a few doctors and health experts have come up and said, quoted a few things out, mainstream ones. And it was slightly elevated. It was about 5.7. And obviously when I got my markers checked, it said it was still in a high, it was in the normal range. It was still in a high normal range. But a lot of people have come out and said that's more of a pre-diabetic range. But I mean, as I said before, from the research I've done and listening to guys like you as well, it's not just as cut and dry as having a high HbA1c means that is totally bad. And you can only look at that and that's it. So I like, from doing a lot of research, I kind of obviously wanted to sort of speak to you about it as well, and obviously get your input on it and knowing how you feel about it, about the red blood cells living longer. And it's actually, it can be seen on people on carnivore. It has been shown before, and it's not as cut and dry as just having a high HbA1c is the be all and end all. That's terrible. Look at what this diet has done. I just don't believe that.
Yeah, I mean, I did message you about it as well, and it's a calculation, and this is the thing. People have heard this before from me, and I've been banging on about this for a long time because I've got over a decade of doing private bloods, and it is, very different in the carnivore space because we're different. The way we eat is different. Those normal ranges, in inverted commas, are based on people that eat 40 to 65% carbohydrates. Then they're not optimal. So we're looking at the normal ranges firstly in a wrong environment because we are eating no carbohydrates or very low carbohydrates. So the metabolism of both bodies very different if you're carnivore or if you're plant-based. So very different. And the HbA1c is based on an assumption. So it's taking other measurements and then assuming that your red blood cells live a particular time. Now, when I trained as a phlebotomist, I remember being told that if you see an HbA1c that's very low, and it seems to be an anomaly because the person's blood glucose is normal, their insulin is normal, C-peptide is normal, then we have to ignore the HbA1c if they're hemolytic anemic because their red blood cells are dying too soon. So what would you say to somebody that's got a continual glucose monitor and great bloods, fasted glucose looks good, insulin looks good, C-peptide looks good, but their HbA1c is a bit high? Well, is it because their red blood cells are living longer? And of course, that is provable because you can do a reticulocyte count, and many of the people that I coach do just that. And we can categorically prove there's other couple of measurements, MCV and RDW, which is how the red blood cells look. They're getting on a bit. They're a bit long. So those two measurements are a little bit higher, which is sort of an old and gnarly red blood cell because it's been around the block a few times. But the reticulocyte count is nailed on. If it's low, it just shows that the production from the bone marrow of red blood cells has slowed down. What does that tell you? Well, that tells you that your red blood cells are living longer. It's really that simple. I think Dr. Paul Mason might be somebody who talks about it, Ben Bickman as well. So it's not me, just some guy on the internet. Like I say, I've got the decade of doing these labs and looking at people in this way of eating. And there are other measurements. The estimated glomerulus filtration rate of the kidney is another one that's calculated. LDL is calculated. So when you said your HbA1c is a bit high, I'm like, well, so you need the reticulocyte count to be able to go because my red blood cells are living longer, and people need to start researching before they start commenting that this is bad. They don't understand. Now it's different if your average blood glucose on your CGM is high and your fasted insulin is high, your C-peptide's high, something's going on. I've never seen it. I've never seen that in carnivores in 5 years. That doesn't happen. So, I got on my little high horse there. But this is the thing. people will comment without all the knowledge, without all the pieces in front of them. I think that's the worst thing. I'm really open-minded. If, like I said to you, if someone came on and said, I'm eating avocados and I feel great, if I had 100 people say that, I'd be like, right, okay, what's in avocados that really helps a carnivore? I'm not into this. If you're carnivore, you can't eat things that aren't animals, because do you know what? You couldn't drink water. You couldn't have salt. They're not animals. All right. So an egg really technically isn't really an animal. And, so I feel these sort of labels are really annoying. I take my hat off to you for doing the experiments and being public about it. I personally don't think these things will be beneficial long term, because I don't think carbohydrates help, but I'm happy to be proven wrong, because there's not many people, and this is where I'm a bit disappointed with Paul Saladino, but stay predominantly carnivore and add a little bit seasonally and local. Let's say that might be a really good experiment. Seasonal local fruits added into carnivore, will that be better for you or worse? Because I honestly think if you were a hunter-gatherer and you were out and you saw a blueberry bush or a blackberry bush or something, I think you'd eat it. Sorry, I just think you would, because you're gathering food, you're trying to hunt animals, which is obviously better use of your time and nutrients, and you're going to get more bang for your buck. But yeah, if there's a tree of fruit there, and this is the other thing, many people have got a Disney view of what the world used to be like, full of trees with oranges and bananas and stuff like that. If you're put anywhere on the planet Earth that's very green, you wouldn't be able to eat much of those things without being really worried, because most of them would be dangerous to you. Oranges didn't even exist on the planet 500 years ago. Most of the fruit that we eat now is nothing like it used to look. So that's my little rant there. Normally I don't talk much, Cameron. I think you wanted me to, didn't you?
Yeah, I mean, it was good. It's good insight to obviously understand from you, someone who knows exactly what they're talking about. I think, and like you say, I think it's not as cut and dry. I think it's so now, it's just like, it's so normal now just to say, oh, well, it's clear, like, look at this. Well, there's got to be some nuance to it. There can't just be, there's nuance to everything. And like you say about the labels and stuff, and people saying, what's carnivore and what's not, and all this sort of stuff. And it's like, well, there has to be a lot of, there's not just it's not a one size fits all at all. It has to be a bit more, you have to look at other metrics, other numbers, and understand what's going on. And like you say, anecdotal evidence, if someone's feeling awesome and everything looks good, but they might have a slightly elevated HbA1c, are they just going to abandon that and go, oh no, well, maybe I got it all wrong, and I'm just going to go back to eating the way I used to eat just to get, but then you might do your bloods again, and then you might get a low HbA1c, and the doctor might say, oh, you cracked it. But then you might think, oh, but now I'm not sleeping great. I've got brain fog. I've got inflammation, and I just don't feel as good. And that's the thing. And honestly, when I say I'm not concerned, people get mad, because when I say I'm not concerned, they go, how can you not be concerned? I'm like, well, I'm just not. I know how I feel. So if I was feeling terrible and I was feeling like and things were not good, then I'd be like, right, well, something needs to be happening here. But this is why I never get concerned. And I think that rubs people the wrong way, because they're thinking, but I've seen it with tons of people who have messaged me saying, Cam, I've got high cholesterol. I said, well, how do you feel? Great. Well, there you go. You've answered your own question. You know what I mean? You feel awesome. Why are you so concerned? You know what I mean? These things have never been the main problem, and they never have. And you should be able to tell how you feel. What you eat determines how you feel. So if you're feeling great, and just because something might look a bit strange on a bloodwork panel, then but it's one thing. It might be one thing or two. It's like, is it really that? If it's something that seriously needs addressing, you're really concerned, yeah, you could look into it. But I mean, it's not something. It's just so cut and dry, and yeah, that's definitely the reason, and you need to stop this because this is what's going to hurt you. And it's good, of course, you're going to get all the people who say, or, it's like, they just say, oh, well, now you might not realize it, but in a few years, you feel great now, but it's like, what will it be doing to you? Well, there's been people doing this a lot longer than me. There's been people doing it like yourself, 5+ years, 10, 20+ years, who are still feeling pretty good and still haven't had the need to eat anything else, really. And that's just what they feel great on. So that's the thing. I mean, it's not. What I'm saying is, it's certainly not as straightforward as that. And I'm glad you cleared that up as well.
Good, thank you. Yeah, and I mean, I do a weekly live question and answer in a small community that I do with my co-host Richard Smith, and somebody had heard me say that I'd had somebody send me the bloods, and literally they were textbook perfect. And she booked a coaching session. She said, I want you to go through my blood. So I went through the bloods. I said, you know, literally I can skim through this because everything's in range, right? Slap bang in the middle. How do you feel? And she went, awful. Right. So that's really common. You know, people can have perfect bloods and feel awful. And then, so I was recounting this story and somebody in the comments said, so what would you rather have? Feeling really great and bad numbers, or feeling really bad with good numbers? And I said, you need to reframe it, because if you're feeling really good and you've allegedly got bad numbers, I question who says they're bad.
Mm-hmm.
Because obviously for you, they're not, because you're thriving. And I had a fantastic client, and I don't want to bore you too much with me because we're talking to you, but we need to running out of time, but I think you'll like this. They came to me and they said, I am subclinical with my TSH, my thyroid stimulating hormone. And they're really worried, like you just said. And they're telling me I should be worried. And I said, well, how long have you got readings for? 4 years, he said. 4 years. And the range was 0.4 to 4 for TSH. And it was all under that quite considerably. It was like 0.3, 0.27, all this sort of stuff. And I said, well, what's the function of TSH? And he said, well, to produce T4 primarily. And I went, yeah, well, let's have a look at your T4. And the range was 10 to 20. And his T4 was 15, 16, 15, 14, 15, all throughout this 4-year period. It was absolutely perfect. And I said to him, right, this is perfect. Can I tell everybody about this and show people this? Because if you were the first person on earth to ever do this blood test, and we were trying to work out from this blood test, what is the perfect TSH? Because your T4 is in the perfect range, your TSH is perfect. You would be the range. And anyone above that would be out of range. So that's how we should start thinking. Do you know what? We're told stuff and we just accept it. You said it before we came on air, and we shouldn't. We should question it. So you're doing experiments, absolutely fine with me. I think it's really interesting. If you get any other anomalies on your blood, I'm quite happy to come on and go, let's put this in context. Let's look at the questions. Who says it's high? What does that actually mean? And, take it from there. But anyway, Cam, did you want to finish with anything?
Well, I just wanted to, it's been a great conversation, man. And I think that it's great to hear from guys like you, like I say, who have got a background in this, have been doing it a long time. That's why I wanted to talk to you and stuff and get your input on things. And it's interesting, like just discussing it. Then it's like it's not just as simple as, this is the range and that's it, be all and end all, done. Like, it's definitely not. And this is why I don't get concerned about these things, because I think outside the box, and I'm aware that these things are not just because I'm also aware how the mainstream works and how a lot of the mainstream medical advice works, and how, there can be a lot of vested interest in there. And I think that ultimately there's not much profit made, like I said before, off healthy people. I think if everyone was healthy, there would be not much need for medications and these ranges to occur. I don't think these ranges, this is the thing, who makes these ranges up? And who says they're good, who says they're bad? So is it, and this is the thing. So I think people have to take a bit of nuance to that and realize that if ultimately for me, it's all about how you feel. If you're feeling awesome, feeling amazing, everything's working well, then what have you got to worry about? What have you got to fear? So that should be the ultimate first test should always be, how are you functioning? How's your energy, sleep, mood? Are you just everything? I mean, how are you everything? How are you all feeling in general? Inflammation, like, are you having any flare-ups, any skin problems, anything like that? All these things have such a massive impact, and you should be able to judge. I've always believed that if everything's working well, why stop? Yeah, of course you can add things in if you want to, but I mean, then if you add something in and it doesn't work, then then that thing is not working for me, and that's the thing. and it ain't working. It's not working. It's not working. I'm going to take it out. But don't be concerned about people who say you have to eat vegetables, you have to eat, loads of carbs. You have to have this. You have to have that X amount of whatever, because there's no such thing. There's no such thing as just a set amount, because there's so many people who do carnivore, who follow a much more stricter carnivore approach. You've only got to look at Michaela and Jordan Peterson, who have changed their lives and stuff, and so many people who just focus on the very strict stuff. Do people have to do it long term? Probably not, but they know exactly. I think having a base of animal foods in the diet, building around that, seeing how you feel is the ultimate way to, in my opinion, the ultimate way to live. Because I think these foods are what makes people thrive long term.